I could make that model, do test renders of it, going by the camera, and then put those animations on it. Of course, then it was a VHS tape. Give a VHS tape to Herman Zimmerman, and he could go over and show Rick Berman the model flying through space. And then put those animations. We could change the lighting. We could change the angle. Or it could come back to the art department, and Herman could say, well, Rick would like the nacelles to be a little shorter. Or I could take that model and I could stretch it and expand it and change the color and have a revision back the same day for them to look at. You can't do that with a physical model. It's not possible. So I ended up doing some stuff for Gary, made a model for him. And as I was leaving to go back to the art department, I said, wow, Gary, that was really fun. I hope we get a chance to do that again. And I remember Gary stopped and looked at me and he said, be careful what you wish for. Because eventually what happened was that after Enterprise was canceled, Gary was the CG supervisor on Battlestar Galactica. And as soon as Enterprise was canceled, he had me on the phone the same day and asked me to come to BSG. And there's another incredible science fiction show. So, Gary, Gary basically, he said, I'm going to drag your dead, bleeding body behind me all the way through the show. So when DS9 ended, I ended up jumping over to Foundation Imaging, which was about a half an hour north of Paramount. It was one of the first CG facilities. And it was run by a guy named Ron Thornton, who made a name for himself doing CG on television for Babylon 5, which is probably one of the first times we ever saw CG on that scale being done for a TV show. Now, you look at it today and it looks kind of gamey, but it was the very beginning. And I knew Ron. I went up there and Ron hired me right away, and I went directly on the last day of Deep Space Nine. I went up to Foundation Imaging. Ended up working with Rob Bonchoon and Mojo on Voyager.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You say you just took this program home. This was in the days of Sun computers, surely. Huge, expensive Sun computers.
No. See, that was the thing about Lightwave. It was one of the first programs. Of course, that program has kind of been outstripped a little bit by a lot of the programs like Maya, but it still is a terrific program. But one of the wonderful things about it was that it would run on a computer it didn't need to be a monstrous computer. You needed a decent amount of RAM, but not like what you would expect. You could use your desktop computer to do it. And as a matter of fact, when we did effects for Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, it was really all off-the-shelf stuff. Which is, and that's what made it affordable, basically. Because on TV, it's not like the movies where you have huge amounts of money. Look at movies today. If you go to see one of the latest Marvel extravaganzas and see how long those credits of visual effects artists go by the screen. It's unbelievable. There must be thousands of names there. When we did Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica, there might be 10 names. That's it. That's about all the people we would have to do those shows. And still, we were able to do stuff that was pretty much motion picture quality. But what it really amounts to is who is doing the work. And if you have passionate people who love it, then you can take modest stuff and turn out really amazing work. So I went to Foundation Imaging, where I worked on Voyager, but I also worked on a show called The Roughnecks Chronicles, which was like
the Starship Troopers one?
Yes, it was a Starship Troopers CGI show. Yeah. And that
there was a show of Starship Troopers?
Yes, but it was quite a while ago. It was like, we're talking like
late
late 90s. It was like 1998 or something like that. And it was really groundbreaking. So I was learning an awful lot. And when I went to Foundation, I was a neophyte, but I learned pretty quick. And because I was a makeup artist for so long, I got into doing characters and faces and stuff like that in the computer as well. So I was at Foundation for 2 years, and then when Enterprise came around, Herman asked me back. Went back to the art department, had my old desk back, had Mike and Denise there again, which is, they're like family to me. And it was a wonderful experience. So I was in the enterprise art department as an illustrator. Like I said, back in 1999 or 2000, art departments were all graphite, pencils, vellum, light boxes. You would do all your drawings for sets on vellum in pencil, and then you would run those through a blueprint machine. As a matter of fact, when I was on Deep Space Nine, Rod Roddenberry was our PA. He was our production assistant in the art department, and he used to make all our blueprints for us. He was just a kid. But as I was telling these guys, the great thing about that was that I could yell, "Roddenberry, get in here!" and feel like a big shot. But back then, everything was pencils and graphite. And now I'm coming back to the art department. I'm bringing the CG program with me. And it was really, we may have been the first television art department that was using CG to do set design and ship design. It happened in the movies, but almost certainly we were the first ones to do it for TV. So I was in that art department as an illustrator. Any questions?
Let me ask really quickly, and I want to ask everybody in the room as well. Originally, we had thought, well, it'll be Doug, and he'll walk around and he'll point out some neat things in the Nexus. I mean, we can go in and look at some of the artifacts if you want to, or if we just want to stand here and ask questions. I mean, it's
up to you.
Honestly,
guys.
It's been a fantastic time already.
I could blather all day about this.
I love listening to this.
Oh, honestly,
I'm an
so much of my
illustrator
life. It's in
I'm
my
an
DNA.
illustrator RL, you see, so it's really fascinating to hear.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Excellent.
All right,
All right, well, then, I know Elliot had a question about Starship Troopers, because he's been threatening for the past couple of days to ask that. I have a question for you really quickly, though. So you came on to DS9 in the art department, but when I watch DS9, occasionally I'll see a makeup that I'm like, that could be Doug? Did you do any makeup for DS9?
I didn't do any makeup for DS9. All the makeup that I did was on Next Generation.
Did you have good Klingons?
Oh, well, when I was on Next Generation, I did Klingons, I did Romulans, I mean, you name it. And I had, being a makeup artist is a whole nother thing again from being in the art department. You spend more time with the cast than anybody. And you're kind of like, you become their mommy, Are you feeling okay? Would you like me to rub your shoulders for you? Oh, your nose is running. Here, let me wipe your nose for you. They usually what happens is that in the beginning, if you're doing prosthetics on an actor, they hate you. They don't want you near them. They don't want cold alcohol swashed on them at 3 a.m. and then sticky glue and appliances stuck to them, and it's going to be on them for 12 hours. And so in the very beginning, they see you and they want to run away. They don't. So how many of you guys have heard of something called Stockholm Syndrome? You know what Stockholm Syndrome is?
Yeah.
That's the way it is. You're holding them captive, but you're also taking care of them, and you want to know if they need something to drink or if they feel okay. And pretty soon, they fall in love with you. So it becomes you become family with people that you have to do makeup on. That is a different kind of friendship than just being friends. You're almost like family. So I spent a lot of time in the makeup trailer and on set. I mean, huge numbers of hours on stage. And you would become a crew member. You felt like a crew member. I mean, I used to sleep in sick bay on the bio bed over lunch. I got in trouble for it, too.
So you spend a lot of time with Michael Dorn?
Oh, God, yeah. Dorn is one of the fun... That was the thing about that cast. They were one of the funnest cast I've ever worked with. And I mean, I've been in the business now about 37 years. In all that time, Next Generation was more fun than any cast I'd ever worked with. They were like a bunch of rotten kids. I mean, they were playing pranks on each other constantly, always getting into trouble. Michael Dorn, when I walked on stage, when he found out my name was Drexler, he thought that was a great Klingon name. and he would roll it over, Drexler. And every time he would see me, he literally would yell, Drexler, and he would do that on stage. I'd come on stage, and he'd be all the way across the stage, dressed as Worf, and be yelling, Drexler. Now, one day, I'm walking between the stages, and I had a crew jacket on, and it said Drex, D-R-E-X, on my jacket. And I ran into Ira Bear, who was the producer on Deep Space Nine and a writer. And we're chatting, and he looks at my jacket, and he says, Drex. And I said, yeah, Dorn thinks that's a great Klingon name. And he goes, huh. And the next day in rewrites, there was a Klingon named Drex. I think it was Drex. I think he was a House of Martok, wasn't he? Worf ends up killing him in an episode. But I was like, well, I got my own Klingon Drex. Amazing. But yes.
Can I ask you a question about that, Doug?
Sure.
So this is Elliot speaking over here.
Elliot, is that you dancing?
It's not me dancing. I'm the. Hang on. Let me do a little raise hand. Sorry,
Wave at
I'm
me.
desktop mode. I'm wave. Oh, wave. Here we go. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, I like your outfit.
Yeah. So I just had a question about.
Skin of evil looking thing.
You said you didn't do makeup in DS9, but you did in TNG, and that's the thing
Yeah.
that always amazed me about makeup work is Worf looks like Worf every single episode from different shows, and the Ferengis all look like the Ferengis, and it doesn't matter what episode it is, Quark looks like Quark. Like, how do you be that consistent with something that's like so pliable as like clay on someone's face?
Well, the thing is that the appliances are, the way it works is that Michael Dorn is going to be Worf. We bring him into the makeup lab, put him in a chair, and we do a cast of his head, which only takes about 20 minutes. Of course, if you're claustrophobic, it's not so good. And I've had people flip out with their head encased and actually get up and try to run, and they can't even see where they are. Anyway, Michael Dorn was never that way. But you bring him in, you do a head cast. Now, Michael can go home, and I've got a copy of his head. Mike Westmore has a copy of his head. And he takes that plaster cast of Michael Dorn's head, and he sculpts the changes that will turn Michael Dorn into Worf. Once he has that sculpt done, and he shows it to, in the beginning, Gene Roddenberry and Rick Berman, and they decide they like it, then Mike takes those clay pieces and he makes molds off of them. Once you have the molds, you clean the clay out of the mold, and then you inject foam latex into those molds. The foam latex, once it's in the mold, gels. It becomes spongy but solid. It still has to go in the oven and is baked for about 2.5 to 3 hours. And once it's baked, you take it out, and it's just like the foam rubber you might have in, your couch. Only one side of the foam rubber piece is shaped like Worf's face, and the inside is a negative of Michael Dorn's face. So you take these pieces, which are very delicate and pliable, and they will fit perfectly onto Dorn's face. So that part is always the same. The appliances are, there's no issue there. They always look exactly the same. The trick is knowing how to glue them up. Like that. I mean, when we did I remember Lal, I don't call it Dave's daughter, but we had Leonard Crowfoot. When Data makes Lal originally looks almost like an Academy Award. It's like this gold featureless android.
Yeah.
And so there were appliances that went on Leonard's face that simplified his facial features and on his chest. And we also had appliances on his naughty bits too. they would do, you know how on the ships they would have motion control? You'd have a camera on an arm that would move around the ship, and it would do maybe 4 or 5 passes around the ship. One pass would be for the windows, just the window lights lit. One pass would be for the warp engine glow. One pass would be for specularity hits on the ship. And then you put them all together. If you're going to do a show where one person is playing 3 people, arm that had a computer attached to it and motors, and that you could do a camera move through the room and shoot it with Brent as data. Then you could go back to position A, reset the camera, bring Brent back as Noonien Sun, start the camera, hit go again, and now look, you've got another pass that has data, it's that Brent twice, then you do it a third time, then you can put those 3 pieces of things together and everything lines up perfectly. In the old days, like in the 60s, you know, it was deep curves. They would have to divide the screen down the middle. You're a makeup artist, you're the first one to get there, and you're the last one to leave. Because you've got to be there before everyone else. That the actor is going to need to go to wardrobe and hair, and they want to get started at like 6:30 or 7. If it's a 4-hour makeup, you got to be there that much earlier to do it. Then afterwards, you got to get whoever it is out of their makeup, and that makeup is made to stay. And so it might take you an hour just to get them out of makeup. And as a matter of fact, speaking of LOL, oh man, I'll never forget this as long as I live. Mike Westmore gave me this makeup that was made by a local lab in the San Fernando Valley, and he said, at the end of the day, you just take them and you use some of this. And he gave me it was like peanut oil. I'd never used peanut oil to take makeup off, but I guess it was inexpensive. He says, and the makeup will just come right off. And now I had been a makeup artist at this point about 12 years, and I know that the prosthetic adhesive that we use to put this makeup on with, I had my doubts about that. And then at the end of the day, after a long, long day, I started taking that makeup off, and it was like, and it was not budging. And I'm like thinking, man, I am in trouble here. And it was 2:30 in the morning. I literally called the studio and had them open the studio gym where there was a shower where I could take Lenny into the shower with steaming hot water and a loofah and scrub him. It still took like an hour. And of course, it was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had because it's the first time I ever took a shower with another man. Yeah. It was the only time. But it was like scrubbing down like it was like being in the circus, scrubbing a circus elephant or something.
Can I ask another question about the makeup?
Yes.
Marina Sirtis, I saw her do a talk, and she said that Michael Dorn had a problem with it was making him ill or something that used to the glue, I think it was, to apply to him, and yet she got it changed or something.
I don't remember anything happening like that with Dorn. I put on hundreds and hundreds of makeups. I've never seen anybody get sick from it. Although someone might have a reaction to glue day after day after day after day, and you might have to give the actor, you might have to arrange the schedule to give the actor's skin a chance to recover. But honestly, I've worked with actors who said that it's one of the best things that they've ever done for themselves because it's like getting a facial every day, you know?
Can I ask a question? We talked about how you went from makeup into the art department into CG. We didn't actually talk about how you got into makeup.
I started in the makeup business. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of a guy named Dick Smith. Dick Smith, in my opinion, is one of the greatest makeup artists who ever lived. And makeups that he was particularly known for were The Exorcist. He did Linda Blair's possession makeup in The Exorcist. He did Dustin Hoffman in a film called Little Big Man, which you've probably never seen. But watch it. Little Big Man is such a wonderful movie, but in it, he plays a 107-year-old man in the very beginning of the picture. And it's an incredible makeup. And I was working, I guess I was about 24 or 5, and I was working in an architectural supply in Manhattan that they sold art supplies to architects. And they had a Halloween party one year. And I was always collecting articles on special effects. I had articles on how Planet of the Apes makeup was done. I had articles on how they shot miniatures. And of course, back then, we didn't have internet yet. So you couldn't just go on the internet and type in how to do a life cast and get 2,000 things on YouTube that shows you exactly how to do it. You would have to collect articles. You really had to hunt. And I had this article on how to do a Planet of the Apes makeup. And I'd never sculpted before, never made a mold before, or any of that stuff, and figured I was going to give it a shot. And I did it, and it was like magic. I had this creature. It was like I had created a life. There's this like Dr. Frankenstein moment where it's like, it's alive, it's alive. It just sweeps you away. And I became totally obsessed with makeup, and I started getting every book I could find, reading everything I could find on it. And I found out, I had picked up this book called Richard Corson Stage Makeup, which is still a master text. It's still out there. If you're interested in makeup, I recommend anybody pick it up, Richard Corson Stage Makeup. And there was a chapter in there on this guy named Dick Smith. And it showed him doing makeups for Little Big Man and The Exorcist and Dustin Hoffman. And I was so amazed. And I started studying everything I could get on this guy. And I used to get pictures out of the books of him in his lab. And I had you couldn't scan something then. We didn't have computers yet. I used to take the pictures, and I had a Besseler projector where I would take a page and put it on a projector and project it on the wall and try to read the labels on the containers on his shelf. Well, one day, a friend of mine named Doug Murray wrote articles for magazines like Cine Fantastique. And he said, why don't you come over? I have some appliances for Planet of the Apes. So I went to his house and I brought pictures of my work. And he said, I just did an interview with Dick Smith. I'm going to give you his telephone number. And I couldn't believe it. And I was terrified to call him. I mean, I think it took me a couple of weeks to build up the courage to call him up. And when I got him on the phone, he kept me talking for like an hour, giving me information, telling me where to get stuff, telling me what kind of materials he had. And we started a correspondence. And this guy just walked over the table. We started a correspondence.
Back of myself too.
And there's 2 of them.
Oh my God, Siamese strangers.
Oh no, you didn't crash, did you?
So a couple of months later, he said, I'm about to start a movie with David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve. It's called The Hunger. It's a kind of a new wave kind of vampire flick. And are you available to come work on it? I was like, I lost my mind. I couldn't believe it. Dick Smith was asking me to come to work. His lab was 20 minutes above New York City, so I could go to Grand Central Station, take a train up there, and I was working with the master. And that was my education in makeup, because that movie was huge. It had like 4 or 5 stages of old age makeup for David Bowie, puppet heads, crumbling mummy suits. So that was the start of my career, and it's been going ever since.
That is such an in at the deep end, like that's amazing, because the makeup in that movie was incredible.
It was amazing. I cannot believe my luck. I've been really lucky.
Were you in illustration education before all that as well?
I'm mostly self-taught. I did go to the Art Students League for 6 months, but that was about it. The Art Students League is a art school in Manhattan on 57th Street that has been there since like the early 1900s. Norman Rockwell went there. And it was really a wonderful school in that there were no grades. There was no diploma. You didn't get anything. You didn't take anything. You didn't, First of all, in this business, they never ask you what school you went to or, I want to see your diploma. No one cares. What they care about is your work. They want to see your work. So, to me, that was the ultimate art school. You didn't get a phony baloney diploma.
Yeah.
you took away from it whatever you got out of it and how much work you put in. So I went there for sketching and drawing for 6 months, but other than that, it was mostly all self-taught.
That's awesome.
I have a question related to that. This is totally the watermelon head. Just to identify myself. So yeah, you've amassed all these tools and techniques over your long career. I'm wondering, ever, like, I think it's from Illustrator to Lightwave to CD Projekt. Has there been a tool where you're interested in it? I mean, you started learning it, where you're like, this is really not for me, doesn't jive with my style, and you decided not to continue with it?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Not really. Not really. I've always had a pretty good idea what I wanted to do and whether I would find it fascinating. I never started anything and said, nah, this isn't for me, I don't want to do it. I've always been very lucky in that way. Part of it is, actually the formula is so simple. It's to just know what it is that you enjoy. I know I've met a lot of people who don't know what they like. They don't know what they want to do, which is hard for me to fathom. But even when I was a little kid, I always knew I wanted to be a sketcher or a designer, and as long as you stick with your passions, you're not going to go wrong. I think the only time, look, if I had been given a job in a garage tearing down engines for cars, that probably would have happened there. I'd go, oh man, I'm not for this, because it just goes beyond the way my mind works, being a mechanic, I'd hurt myself,
The competition today is so fierce. You have to be like really hot on everything to get into positions like what you got into these days.
Well, it definitely is harder now. There's for one thing, it's harder to distinguish yourself as a visual effects artist because, like I said, if you watch like one of the latest Marvel movies, extravaganzas, and look at all those freaking names that are on one movie that goes for minutes and minutes and minutes, you can't even read the names, they're so tiny. When we were doing CG, we were kind of on the frontier and breaking ground, and there were smaller groups of us, and it was more like a little club of people, that got along with each other. Now it's become, like for instance, when we did Battlestar Galactica, the visual effects department was just like, maybe like 5 CG guys, and we had some compers, and we all just knew each other as a little club. We all hung out together. Now it's like most of the work goes to facilities. There's like Zoic or Pixamondo, where they have, like 150 people. And so it's... So, and plus there's so many schools where people are going to learn CG. There's so many people learning how to do it. I think it's harder to set yourself apart than it used to be. I think in that way, although I couldn't get the information as easy as people can today, it was easier, I think, to break in. And the same, you ever see Face Off? TV show Face Off? The makeup show? Mm-hmm. Yes. I was a judge on one of those episodes. And it's Mike Westmore's daughter is the host of the show. Makeup has been kind of devastated by CG. A lot of stuff that you used to do, like creatures, monsters, even old age or youthening people, can be done in the computer much easier than actually doing it on stage. And I see people on Face Off every week who want to be a makeup artist. And hundreds of them. And where are they going to get the job? Where? There aren't that many jobs.
Theater.
Well, theater, but and there's plenty of theater. And I always tell people, if you want to get started, do local theater. Volunteer to do makeup at local theater. If you really love it, you're going to do it no matter what.
You're going to do it no matter where.
You're going to do it no matter what. Even if you have been told by a knucklehead like me that thousands of people are trying to be a makeup artist, that's not going to make any difference. And it shouldn't make any difference. If you're really excited about it and you're passionate about it and you're obsessed by it like I was, you're going to do it anyway. And you know what? That's what you should do. Buck the odds, take a chance, because you never know. Look,
Amen.
when I was getting into it, my father, he was like a depression. It's as if one of the things that I guarantee you is going to happen is that eventually they are going to take time out of the shooting schedule and reshoot scenes using a 360 camera, so that if you buy the DVD or Blu-ray, or you're streaming it, you could download a VR part of it, where you could be in the scene, where you're in the set, and you could move around and be in different positions while the actors are going through their scene. And there's absolutely no doubt that within a couple of years, there's going to be additional content to movies where you're in the scene. But yes, I've been getting into it, and I've been having an amazing time with it. It's so incredible.
I would love to hear more about that project, because I've been toying with one on history of costumes, but not so where it's just a museum where you walk around, but where it's more interaction and telling a story.
Well, you see, that's just it. You can, well, if you're doing a thing on costume,
yeah,
you can have costumes, but you could also have screens that open up and unfold in front of you and show a little movie of a scene from a film. And
awesome. I don't want to take your time out of your talk, though.
Oh, no,
yeah,
please,
awesome.
please
I
go
would
ahead.
love to.
Yeah.
No, but someday I'd love to talk to you about all that.
Oh, well, listen, I'm on, Facebook. You could always send me a message on Facebook at my name. And I'm always happy to talk about that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
So exciting to
Thank
me,
you. Okay.
Yeah, pick up, a program like Unity or Unreal Engine. Those are two VR programs.
I'm learning Unity. I do Sansar, and then I do Maya and ZBrush and all that crap.
Oh, well, you're all set. You're all set. You could start doing it.
I'm
right
soulless,
away.
but I go by Deborah Salsa, so that's who will get a hold of you.
Okay, well, I'll keep an eye open.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you think you might build an experience in here, in Sansar?
Well, I tell you, I'd love to help these guys out with their museum here. Star Trek is such an important part of my life. It's in my DNA. I'm very detail oriented, and I'm a continuity freak. And I've done so many different aspects of Star Trek, like the interfaces and stuff. I could really give them a hand with that. I'd love to give them a hand with their original series bridge set. Have you been on it?
Yep.
It's when I go on it, it's not the Enterprise. It's another ship, because there's a lot of little differences on that bridge. So I tell myself, okay, well, this is the Congo. This is the USS Congo. So it's all a little different. It was built at a different time, But when we did Trials and Tribulations, which was a high watermark and a thrill, because we got to recreate those sets. And
that is the best episode.
I'm telling you,
the effects in that episode blow my mind.
We had such an amazing, and I could not believe it. when Mike Okuda came to me and said, we're going back to the original series and we're going to make, the thing is that for us, we wanted the ship to be absolutely the way it was. That we didn't change a damn thing on it. When we did the sets, we made the sets as close as we could possibly make them. There was no revising them or, for us, it was history, and we wanted to be able to go back to that and have everybody watch it and go, oh my God, this isn't kind of like it. This is it. Now, we didn't use CG on that one. Those were physical models. Greg Jean built a 4.5-foot Enterprise. We had a really big model. Yeah, we had a big model of the K7. And as I remember, Gary had the Enterprise on a stand, and he called us up and he says, the model's beautiful, he goes, but it needs more weathering. And so Okuda and I went down to Image G, and there's pictures of us standing on ladders drawing with a pencil on the surface of the ship to add weathering and lines and stuff like that. And I remember that while we were doing it, Gary was plotting out his camera moves. He had one of they used to call it a Dijkstraflex, which I think the first time it was really used was on Star Wars, where the camera would move around the ship and could repeat that move like as many times as you needed it to, because as I was saying before, we used to shoot the ships in different passes. You wouldn't just do, on the original series, you just did one pass of the camera on a track that went by the Enterprise. When we did Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, they had the computerized camera that could retrace its path. So, as I had said before, you would have the camera go around the Enterprise, and only the lights, only the windows would be lit, and that would be one pass. Then the camera would repeat the move, and then it would be the engines. And so then you could take all those layers, put them together, and be able to sweeten them. You say, well, I want the engine glow to be wider, or I want the spec hits to be brighter. I don't know where I was going with that, but what was the original question? I don't even remember.
Well, so I just wanted to call out